Good morning again, Rinpoche. Thank you for your precious teachings. And good morning, Katrina. Thank you for your translations, and welcome to all online participants. We're happy you can join us. We have one or two more teachings on this text, and if you'd like to make an offering to Geshe for his teachings, or to Katrina for her translations, or for the Abbey, to the Abbey for hosting, you'll find out how to do that in the chat box. Okay, so we'll begin with some preliminary prayers.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With a supreme sign's face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities. Vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom, too well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is a teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strew Mount Meru, foreland, sun, and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall a rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Rana Mandala Kamniryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
딕성 见了。
Oh yeah, oh, no, so.
yeah, that got so. Oh, they are just on Gabas and Besson. They did the back of Songdoa. Jitan Kuba in your bus. Jitan Razo Mitsam Malia. Kubas do chicken, Mambushi and Shiora. Oh, to me, all the soba. And it's meeting Bala Soba, coming Shishi and Yora. Kubachi and Mambo, Mendeba Mambushi on your. Take Katin, but this Hamas of your auntie, the Kubachi bus. It's all Marik, they say. All day, Maranzo Susu Samlet on that day. We need to Susu Samlet on that social condition. Shanda condition, but she's over net on the chick. We need to one day to pay. Shen Cham, $1 to $1 to me. We need to conquer the pa. Hamagunis Wora. They saw Marik batteries. Go Tame Bola Tatu, you and the anything some king bush. Shall I try to share a sober? Condo down like jealous over the Gaga. Nation one day. Run David tapped down to me, may tap the car, but I was a machine. The young girl. Since you didn't go back in your body, some Marik bodies, and nature one is some time machine. You won't be young girl, is a Can she told me 10 was? That is somebody. Kuba sama, kya sama doya tandalia. Samlu tashi bachkura. We need to run a kibbe yuba. Kage me want the samlu tandadi. Shinkuyara. Jineku, she told me 10 was. Oh, 10 days in one day, I was a tonsona. And it meant about somebody. She do this or that. The next one day, the Karisana. She told danger in Rebel Jones soon say. And someday they get tension rebel Jones soon at day. They ran Tada Shan, Shiji Nezul, Tada all sober. That's how Malapa, Tada, the monk, but you the tipper say it and somebody is. Yeah, but tipper say in any. Go back to the bottom, you don't do. Yeah, what is it?
So here, to begin with, as J. Lama Tsongkhapa has said, whatever degenerations there are in the world, the root of all these is ignorance. You taught that it is dependent origination, the seeing of which will undo this ignorance. So in our world, whatever sort of degenerations there are, whatever kind of faults, bad things, the sufferings that we experience, the unwanted, the disharmony and the conflict, all of that has its roots in ignorance, in our way of thinking, of being sort of deluded or unaware of the actual nature of things. I mean, none of us wants to suffer. We and others all want to have happiness and don't want to suffer, but due to our way of thinking, we grasp at a self of that which is actually selfless. We get sort of arrogant with respect to ourselves. We have this thought of I, and we get arrogant and jealous and prideful. And we don't know the actual methods by which to achieve our happiness and to eliminate our suffering. So all of these faults, as it says here, the root of all these is ignorance, is that mistaken knowing. And so because we don't have a knowledge of the way that things actually are, we don't see reality properly, then we end up suffering. So you taught that it is dependent origination, the seeing of which will undo this ignorance, will counteract that ignorance. So if we were to be able to come to an understanding of the way that things actually are, their causes and effects, then we could pacify all of that unwanted suffering. And when it comes to what is the actual reality, you taught that it is dependent origination. So here, when it comes to our understanding of ourselves and others and all of the world, if we are able to remove this kind of ignorance that misperceives all of that, then we can undo the root of all of the degenerations that we experience.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the cool. Then did the vacation, but I'm watching the vacation. Then did the Casimabula Sarimba. Good, I can't let the Jabber Jones. Tambungo condition. Good. I can't eat it so, and the carrot so good. Carrot on the carrier good, some day I was a hako. Till some of my shanda in the sea, you give some time. 내주 건너기어라. 자꾸 지대 감리 치치신 나서를 소바이나라. 난게 대두라 소바이나라 가리나 고티 규단께 가를 때는 용도 어다네. 규단께라 땡진 될네 용기어라. 어디엔데 거 제부 신다 삼마다 제 규진데가 규시데 년례들 거거라. 이 규니여라. 규단께서도 그런 거 유지기 규칙고야라. 사변에 제 마음에 사변에 제 년례들아. 다사다 추담 메들로 저라 소버테도 강가데 레지치게 들어와. 지난 그 교수도 년례다 레지치게 강갈 고쳐래. 이나야 교다 깨서도 교대 년례기 경원주로. 틈무 많이 베큐더라. 제네 코나 틈무 많이 베큐시고 그런 거 가려네 그 년례 교회도 틈무 많이 베큐시고 알아. tenchi chigende sada chuda choda longla sobate tumu ya churi chiri dero. Or chuda ken la tenchen drebani jungate yabu chi samlo kortumna. Ta sosolan debe te kari eme debe kari dise gu inedra. Penju rabu kari yongyo chini tondo tamge inedra kari na. O di chudi dire shaasam chudi ni chumne chuda kende yabu chi chumado. Shenda chibabu yebade de samlo koro koya ke yomara. Razu de chochine ha kongge surudwa kale gyadi shinga tabtu ka karuku do de soso kale gyapti chigudwa oti inde ko yuda kyele tene kyewa tege jitengi cheba bola soba shenji gi chinga yo mare se kyugin changdo na te debude kye ongore se te kyugin de changwa chegore se mejo ajidon geyin kare do tingin kare do te ha ko ache tingin de base tingin de changsona 데부데 콘데베터 야부께 온거로 단 되게 된데 배 치름 치 된데 나게 된다 가지고 그래서 막 무시해서 내진지 된다 지신나 제 던도라서 버텨 주래 아니 잠불len치 김자리냐고 튼리 영야지 김부제 대화전에 대해 간데 그도 주단께 가르고도 그래서 제가 나게 된데서 나게 겨울랑달랑 루칸가 될 상마시에서 자 뒤에 계신부도 와 딜리아드네 메타바세아라 교단께 기대고 깨지긴 유로데 하고도 어디 아무 하거나 깨지게 건 주는 좋아지는 줘야 바데 메타바다 아니 코아바데 지네 코 단다 야가 지네 코 유제 동행원 유래 임바 요게 되게라 네 소소라제 간사를 지네 어레 딸리만도 쳤어 디질람내야 치텐데 투신데 유아제보다 하고는 미다바다 봐 에너지 야가를 지내 콘디 준주야 임바 강가 대화를 지내 준주야 임바 진짜 제 야구 하고도 야 뜻이라나
So here in Buddhism, then, dependent origination is extremely important. This teaching of the Buddha on dependent origination, and we have talked about this a lot. One level of dependent origination is that of causality, that all results arise from causes and conditions. So we need to understand that process of causality. Like when it comes to external phenomena, we need to have an understanding of what causes and what conditions are necessary to bring something about. So there's many levels of dependent arising. We can talk, though, basically when it comes to causality of causes and conditions with respect to internal and external dependent arising. So, for example, like with a seed, a rice seed is the kind of substantial cause that will lead to a rice sprout. It's sort of the uncommon, the unique cause of that, or we sometimes use the word substantial cause, as well as having the kind of coordinating conditions, the soil and the heat and the moisture and so forth. And so understanding what it is that is necessary to bring about a particular result, if we can think well about the kind of causes and conditions, understand the way that those bring about a particular result, then we can sort of make effort at the proper causes. So when it comes to anything within the world, if we want to gain a good harvest from our crops or some other sort of result, we need to have an understanding of the causality. What are the causes? What is the substantial cause that is necessary? What are the kind of coordinating conditions? It's not as though there is some sort of creator who wills things into existence, but rather when all of the causes and conditions are assembled, are complete, that result will come about. So having that knowledge of what are the kind of adverse conditions, what will prevent this from coming about, what are the conducive conditions that lead to it coming about, we can understand then our external world, the kind of environment that we live in, the trees and the sort of external things, as well as what brings about happiness and harmony within society. And then there is the level of internal dependent arising. How do we take rebirth? What are the kind of causes and conditions that lead to that? So when we have this kind of understanding of dependent arising as dependency on causes and conditions, this leads into an understanding of impermanence. If something is dependent upon causes and conditions, then it changes moment to moment. It's not sort of static and remaining the same. And so too, those things that we ascribe as being happiness, we see that they don't actually last and remain. So it is through this understanding of dependent arising that we are led into the understanding of impermanence and suffering and so forth.
Oh yeah. Oh, daga na shi ta de so so sam na ge ten de sam ta na ro. Nga zu ten de ya la chung ni she de she so. To me ma ri chen ni ba le sa ne so ba nam she. Ba yin ya li shi ba ming su che de ne. Mi na wa na che la so ba de. De ne yu to so to. Ene so ti du ru chi yo. O te le te ne ene chu te wa ta me te wa ta shi te so ka ga. Che ne ke ya ta na ya ta chi te so ka ga yo de she ge do. O ti inde ko lü de ya chu de zha shi bo je. Sa yin jung a ro a. Sa chu me ju sa yin jung a so ra cha gu cha da. Ro a ni len be cha da. Nam ga dong sa ge cha da. Shi bo je na lo ya. Sa chu me long jung a te ka ga te gu do. Long gu do. Ma bo je le te je. Den ya cho de do. Ti inde ko da shi de. Rao a chi yo na. Rao a chi yo na. Ene ko che ne ka de re se ne. De re su zu sa shi ko ra. Tiene 풍부 소부지다 시바신이 와라 말아줄 소부 차간디네 치주파도 가봤다나 인게지라고 말바 낭셔도 가겠네 근데 좋아 남주 시베나네 좋아 단두신이 데 마시용 거라 지 야부도 야고만도 지제 대순할 메도아 미기 시바 나베 시바 네 시바세로 그래서 강가 풍부할 바 렌도네 레르날 라메라 아카르세 때달라 땡젠델네 담보 기도사 주제 마부절 땡전 별네 다들 레고도와 근데 봐 다시 맹다서야 다시 차셔 들어라 땡네 봐 딱봐 참지도 마도 라와지요나 근데 풍부다 소보다 셈다 소아들라 저 맹게지 코나 로가지 고도 디나네 고 딱봐라 수레치 고다 이거 문제지 고라 디레스 우조세 티고 말아 그래서 다음에 봐서로 다음에 다 봐서 주단께 초단트들 삼로야보 시다나 아니 유라시엔지 계지린 유라시엔지 근데 그 주단께 경계 초단계 선부치 단계 미션 대공계신데 라와전에 단계에 매버데 와라토라 어디에 그 때내 딱 봐서 주단께를 때내 계주치자 삼다 다시라 때내 그런 어디 다시 차셔라 때내 봐 따보마도 차셔 나네지 라야 매봐 어, 근데 삼을 거나 다음에 부터 좀 거라도도 라와 매버 시키다 게고게 라와 매버 끼는데 그 라와 전에 깨지요 말아 주일 대신 될리야 유아도 알아 다시다 차셔할 때는 봐 명다디 찔린 저거 조사요 말아 근데 어 때네 딱 배때데 또 삼을 소소 다 쇼를 삼을 다네다 강갈라 담보치도 주다 깨할 때는 간데지기도 아니 랑게 맹제타네 친구 조세시 랍데자 차셜 때네 파타 받삼레삼 어 근데 저 삼을 거나 아니 친구가 가가메다 바다 다음에 바다 지 과연의 동야 단도 야보연의 방주도에다 그래서 삼아 지 과라의 시도가 야듯이 손하
So here, when it comes then to thinking about ourself, we have been talking about dependent origination in terms of the 12 links of dependent origination, how it is that we come to take rebirth. So looking at this process by which we have a moment of ignorance, which in turn leads us to create karmic formations, leaving an imprint on our consciousness, which in turn leads to the development of these four mental factors of name and form, and then the 6 sense bases, and in dependence upon those sense bases coming into contact with various external objects, we then give rise to various feelings. And then we have like craving and grasping, and there is the whole cycle of aging and death and so forth. So we can look first at the kind of causal process, the way in which ignorance causes us to create karma and so forth, but also even looking at the way that the person is designated. I mean, we are designated on this particular basis of designation, these aggregates. And when we look at our aggregates, looking at, say, first our form aggregate, we are composed of the various elements: earth, water, fire, wind, space. And so when we look at the kind of earth, the sort of solidity of the body, the water, the cohesion, the heat, the kind of ability to digest and so forth, we also need to have wind to be able to breathe in and out. So when we begin to look at the basis of designation of a person, we can see that there's no autonomous sort of independent person. If there were such a thing, we must be able to sort of point to it. But when we begin to look through all of the kind of components upon which this thing, the I or the self, is designated, we look through all of our physical body. There's nothing that you can point to that is the I or the self. And so then one might look to mind, to consciousness, to the various kinds of consciousnesses. We have feelings. Are those the I? Or is it the kind of discrimination or discernment that says this is this? Or then we can look at our various types of consciousness. We have our mental and our sense consciousnesses and so forth. And so when we begin to look through, we can't find something that we can point to that says that is the self, but rather the self, the I, is something which is merely designated on this particular collection, this basis. And so understanding that, we can come to an understanding that there is no such autonomous self. We can come to see that the person, the I, is someone that is selfless and is impermanent. The self only comes about due to various causes and conditions, as we saw in the process of the 12 links of dependent origination, but it is also something that is dependently designated in the sense that the self is something, the I is something that is given as a label on the basis of this particular collection of aggregates. But we can't find anything that we can sort of point to as being that I. So through this kind of understanding of both causality, dependent arising in that way, and dependent designation, we can come to understand that the person is impermanent and selfless and suffering and so forth, that it is something that is merely designated on this particular basis. Just
Oh yeah, what did you? That didn't say so no mirror machine and Draco, Jiso Jingam do Togora, Togo de Co, Dewajan and Togo Yona. Oh, Jenny, the one she could tangent dene. So the Pojo Kangal tangent dene, and a co Yabu Chito in a Karine Yabuchaku Yora. Matochi, Sosuchi, oh, Sosuchi, Kanjag to Rawachin to Veshi Omardo, Deco. No middle Virginia ko chambada sewagitone. Pamayenda, Sazayenda, Pudu, and the Chichil. Chambada Sevacone Tago de Sungda. Ah, something not the Beke Cheshire teacher. And he shanded to Jucha, Namato Shenda Carsine Naomindo. Nadi Ranzo, yes, Masana. Kangapati Dura, Sevacom Dura. Or teach you the Nico. Somewhat tangent Devil Juasoda. There was a young in a page, somewhat tangent Delne Yongo Yada. Chambada Zawada, Tawa Mechival Soba, some of the Sosajanga Kechurachi. I did get Cheshu in my dosh, Shandalti Mess and the Shanley Tonju, the Kanga Yongura. O Tiyondiko, get some attention to join by the Hakotoa. Chikanga Checho Mara, Penjuchito Kanga, Chichilpa, Tene, Timbu Yon that the oil charging the car, the Wutu charging the car, Teddy, that's a share. tele samlu tanche o de yago mare te yosho sam de yagure te kogure samsa tende samdana tenjin de bar jwa ina changma tumbo a changma debo keba de yongo ara o tende ko tende se de changma cha yora na mi de chen na mi che tenjin de bar jwa yago che dewe julen do ya kari chigodo wa ma tumbe chen tunge julen do ya kari yongo o te samma 주진들 삼을다시 주다 깽게 겐데 파세 튕겐데 투 덴데 삼을다시 때려와 어디 강갈 파차요라 기솔에 차요라 점을 롱발에 차요마도 거서라 가실마도 자서마데 말와 땡진데 버정데 도반을 정말로 캡대요라 주다게 야고 영야게 주다게데 야부 사서 야보요 그래 도보 영야게 주다게데 야서서는 그 도보요 그래 어디 인도고 tenjin debara chungwa de. Chik jang jang ke rangwa de chene yongya meba. Penchu changma tenjin delne. Changme samlo tangya yaga de tangna yaga de yungura. Duwa de tangna duwa de yungura. O tende yinde. Da mangda tu cheso. O da tunda tire. Kasura. Jikden kuiba chingi pa te tsawa marik te. Kanshi tongwe tendo pa tenjin debara chungwa su. Tende de peke sembo. O de. 이 가르치 वर्षन 왜 내줄 가르여 버데 됐다고라 소소그치 남절로 행게날 삼대베 텔 마셔세 텐쟁원에 주다 계속네 가르 연구도 가르다고도 tel다고요라 원에 코라텔 가르나 주다 계게 다시대 샤샬 때네세 딜렌도 왜 내줄 가르여 버데 야고 신토라 텐데 디베케션 버레 데인도 가르소라 야 어디실람나 인도라
So likewise, when it comes to not just ourselves, but like our family, the society that we live in, we should recognize how it is that we are dependent upon others. Our own happiness, our own suffering as well, is dependent upon others. If we have the kind of ability to see others with love and compassion and care about others, then we in turn will experience happiness from that. If instead we sort of only think about ourselves, we only want our own happiness, we see ourselves as more important than others, and that in turn leads us to sort of look down upon, disparage other beings, we can't achieve happiness just all on our own, all by ourselves. But rather our happiness, our well-being is integrally related with others, is dependent upon others. And so here, causality, understanding dependent origination applies really to everything to create harmony and happiness in our family, in our society, with those around us. We need to have an understanding of what are the causes and conditions that will lead to that. How will that come about if we create certain conditions and causes? What are the things that will undermine our happiness and harmony with others? So whether we are thinking about our own kind of family unit or our society, all the way up to countries, the whole world, having an understanding of the way that things actually are, causality, what are good causes and conditions, what are going to be harmful. Again, we can't just be all on our own like an isolated little island, but rather this kind of understanding of dependent origination is applicable not just in thinking about the causes of external things, but as well the causes of our happiness and harmony in the world. So this is extremely important. Again, as Je Lama Tsongkhapa has said, whatever degenerations there are in the world, the root of all of these is ignorance. So we need to look at the kind of sort of rather than just follow after our innate sense of an I, we need to apply our kind of analytical faculties and understand that our happiness and suffering is integral with others. It is dependent and arises in dependence upon others. So this kind of understanding of dependent origination is really, it's not just applicable to understanding causality in the kind of external sense, but also in terms of our happiness and harmony with others. Dependent origination is really a central part of that.
Oh yeah. Oh, the Hindu culture. As Sanjay Songutwa, Sanjay Jigden come let you, but they wait on the others. Jigden they wait on the others. Sanjay Namni Jungadera. Should they there go Jigden they wait on the others. The Gicha Yaboche Tetum get on that. So I never said Chamba Koni Yaboche. They were 대시 기바체 대토에서다래서 대대 가서도 대시 기바체인데 요한텔이야 네 서바콤 잠버지도 서바콤 발로 서바텐데 시나 아니 거야 우체 네트워크로 와 근데 서바콤나 튼조 튼부제 대를 따든다 튼바나 마트 버추나니 남이 나다 지소이나 강가니 조그라 나그 삼르단다 여부지 단에 튼부제 대야 그래서 튼부제 대 차수나 때래가 면도바세 데바트에 내가 가리나 때 야부지 접토 그래서라 그것도에서 최식에는 최 야부지 토우다 지금 야예다 내 강가야 제티 쳐버렸어 것도 어디에도 가서라 나라서 텐델리아 텐진데 버리죠 야야 삼로다 텐델리아 테바체 삼바체 콤바체 야네 야도 제데 미시베 몽바 용수 존에 로 미시베 몽바 아주 가세 통매 마릭바서 담보다가 명다기도와 그래서 그 마릭바 지용 가용실파 매버스에 땡지를 버리고 왔던 남균에 야보 삼을다 소소 땡지를 버리고 단종로 규다 깨알 텐데 초다 초로 삼을다 될 때네로 아니 될 때바체 삼바체네 미다바다 동야와다 동아다 다음에 발서봐 그래서 상마 나 고야 체르체르다네 내 다른 심제 탐제게 좁통게게 그래서 연대 군대지 기부시던 주화적이 대체도 매진 딜에 단다들은 예린예린 매진 알이야 가용용게로 내 가르소라 텐데 삼루다네 미팅바 삼제 탐제 레레레레세 레베차리 레레레레나 투바시네 타르타르 뭐 삼루다 가제 깔래 잡고네 잡네 교육군세 연대 군대지 가사시는 주네 심지어 탐제리아 펜바 좁통게 네바 용수 통게 진주로 시기 삼사 대단달이야 최ñe기 삼사 삼나 배네 랍체보다 최ñe 군문디 고요라 어떤데 군로 세템데 삼바쇼스 안되래
So the Buddha's coming to the world was for the purpose of happiness. The Buddha's teaching of the Dharma is in order to bring about happiness. He taught non-harm, the importance of love and compassion, and taught dependent origination in order for us to have happiness. And so one of the most important components is being able to have patience, to not sort of be reactive to others, but instead create the kinds of causes and conditions for harmony. So when we think about dependent origination, when we have a good understanding of causality, if we want to accomplish something in the world, whether it is like our Dharma practice or something worldly, understanding the proper causes and conditions is really indispensable for that. If we want to do some kind of work that improves the world, we need to have an understanding of what are the causes that will lead to this. And really, all of our problems, all of our suffering comes from this nescience, this lack of understanding, this delusion. It's called this kind of fundamental ignorance. And if we regularly think about dependent origination, if we habituate our minds to that, we can eliminate gradually, eventually, our ignorance. We can get an understanding of suffering and selflessness and emptiness and so forth. And so that really comes by understanding dependent arising. And when we take that even further, we can see that it is the case that this sort of culmination of this understanding comes in the state of Buddhahood. If we really want to be able to achieve the highest happiness, not just for ourselves, but bring that about for others, we can strive for the state of Buddhahood in which one has developed all good qualities and eliminated all faults. And so here we should take up this kind of attitude, this motivation, thinking that whatever kind of efforts I make, whatever sort of difficulty that I go through, I'm doing this sort of practice in order to be able to become such a being who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities. We need to have a kind of longer term sort of thinking that we are going to continue undertake this practice in order to be able to achieve that state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So whatever kind of efforts we make, may it go toward that, particularly here listening to the Dharma. So please set such a proper motivation.
Oh yeah. Chunam tamje kyule chungse sholo kachi yuwa, ti tonda she yuwa. Ti ndorna se, sikan tambu se, chunam tamje kyule chungse ge sikan terwa. Sikan tambu tende yanla chungye je kone, koaro korwe, 교함 타르베 바도 주베 슈네스 근데 야라 중이 건네 코아 코르기와라 디코아 코야게 되네 유디 카레스나세 슈네 바도 주베 슈네 레쿠네 롱제게 이번 두지기 레쿠네 롱제기로 녀모바 남인베세 차다 라소바 녀모로와 대야 깨베 중게데 나오 냠뱅아지 지레데오라 임베 타르반 데반 남게 대달라 템버 메자오시 민직바시 나네 민직바시 고네 최대교라사게 제가 시간 당보되게 민직바시 나네 가르송 거르스나 민직바시 나네 바도 주베 춘디 인시 담제발라 민직베 고네 상게게 최송바 템바인도스 코아 코야게 주소데 차단라 소바 녀모바 대주레세 녀모바 대주레티 코아 코지게 주디레세 상게게 송비오라 담자기오라 바도 주베 춘디 인세 코아 코지리아 코알레 타르마 중게 파제 칭게게 주디데레세 파제 담자발라 미직바스 어디송비오레세 춘나 담제 줄레 중사데 야 되지라나
No. So here, then picking up in the text, this is in regards to that verse where it's the phenomena that arise from causes, the Tathagata proclaimed those causes as well as their cessation, thus taught the paragon of virtue. So here, picking up on page 102, so here, this, in short, with this first line of the verse, the Buddha is saying the obstructions to liberation, or the cause of passing through cyclic existence by means of the 12 factors of dependent arising, is the afflictions that motivate karma. So those who desire liberation should not be involved with these. So in asserting these are the obstructions, I'm talking about causality, he gave the teaching in this line of the verse with one of the four fearlessnesses, the fearlessness of giving the teaching on obstructions. So here, this verse encapsulates the four fearlessnesses, and this first line, which is identifying what the obstructions are, then is teaching by way of the fearlessness of giving the teaching on the obstructions.
Oh yeah. And it's a niberwa. Chunada Julia, did you dishinship so said? Oh, it's a nibe maribala soba yala juni de dan go be juam. Yala juni de dan go be jute, mebso a judira, quacoya jumes. Koya ju let a yamubango, she nimbu, nimbu ju this, the mebso a ju your esse. The garresana, Casada chegi dami musum do tobe, lambit and battery in betini, Comberchaco so she mijiba shinane, Ninju, Tamjabala, mijibe cone sagichu. Never Jonas, Tela Tarcona, the lamb de Samloton in the coms, or thing in June, Tela Tajik cutin direse. Tamjabal Kojiba Mera, Korangusum to change the Sigiwara, we necessary.
So then, with the second line, the Tathagata proclaimed those causes. The Buddha is saying these 12 factors, ignorance and so forth, have a cause that has a countermeasure that ceases karma and afflictions, which are the cause of cyclic existence, or the cause that is to be ceased. This countermeasure is the truth of the path, the direct perception of the selflessness of persons and objects. Therefore, you must cultivate it. So here, with that second line, he's giving this teaching by asserting definite emergence from the causes of cyclic existence, which, among the four fearlessnesses, is the fearlessness of indicating the path of definite emergence. So here, basically, the Buddha is saying, if you want to achieve freedom, then you need to follow this particular path. And he is speaking based upon the direct kind of knowledge that he has acquired himself, and therefore is fearless in indicating, as it says, the path of definite emergence.
Oh yeah. That Julan Goba Kain Ba said, you don't go by the sugar and go in the sugar. Shebet go in the Lambden sugar. Chicken Sumbester, Numumbe, Nimbu Kansa, Chegit, and Musum to Tobe, Lambjet Demba. Kumbala tene kowe tongwe kyudan sheba ane gokpa toba juwa yinbe tenpa sanje ranyi ja o lamde kumbga yina ane gokde de tongwe gokpa tongwe tarwa de tobge reese sanje chomde de ranyi jeja te komne ane tarwa toba yinse pa sungi reese wara ranyi jeja tedar komde tongwe kyudan sheba panso she pangba pinzo tamjeba almije Pangba, kyo kanga de komde, kyo de pa pangsara yinse, nye pangba yinse, tamje balan jigba yo mari, jigba mebe konde sungi wara, ngoyo netsu tinte rete warwa tigade. Maranzo de ne ko jagzi she pangba yinse na, jigba da sheba rete wara. Mi jigba konde sanje je cho sungba, titemba yino siya o tichila.
So, with the third line, as well as their cessation, the Buddha taught their cessation as well. The Buddha is saying, relying on cultivating true paths, directly cognizing the selflessness of persons and objects, which are the countermeasure to the afflictions, you will attain a cessation that brings an end to the suffering of cyclic existence and its causes. Thus, the Buddha himself meditated in this way and eliminated suffering and its causes. So here, this is really explaining true cessations, the cessation that is achieved through cultivating that path. So therefore, one can achieve a freedom from suffering, a cessation of suffering. And the Buddha is speaking from his own experience. So the Buddha gave this teaching by means of fearlessness, of asserting his own aim of perfect abandonment. So the Buddha is able to proclaim his own abandonment fearlessly because it accords with reality. He has completely abandoned all of those afflictions. If we were to try to make such a proclamation, we would be fearful because we are lying. But the Buddha, because he has achieved this, is beyond any fear. So this is the means, the fearlessness of asserting his own aim of perfect abandonment.
Oh yeah. Kejo chembe tege song sedera. Sanje ranile kejo chembe song shate ndege maris tege togo kerwa. Kejo chembe tege song sede shebe kejo chembe tomba rani ke serwa. Tedan gogwa ngodu zede. Yomoda sheje tebe gogwa ngodu zedwa. Inde landor jene nam langja kare torcha kare. Tungele tarbe langja kare. Wa ne tarwa toba la torja de karen de sama ngusum do se rani ji se ba yen so ra landor yen ne nam ngusum do se ba tar chen de se de ge sum ba yen be ke jon chen bo she rani toba phunzo tamje bal me toba phunzo landor yen ne sama tamje chimba che shin ge toba yen se tar chen ba yen se tamje bal me ji ba ra ne toba phunzo tamje bal me ji ba se o ti deng do a mi ji be ko ne che tem ba September Sabateta, Tembayinos, or teaches.
So then with the fourth line, thus taught the paragon of virtue. So we had talked about earlier, those who would say like, well, why is the Buddha praising himself? It's not right to do so. However, of course, the Buddha is speaking from having directly seen or realized these things. So with the fourth line, thus taught the paragon of virtue, the Buddha is saying the teacher, the paragon of virtue, himself actualized true cessation and true paths in this way and brought to perfection the direct perception of what to adopt and what to abandon. So the Buddha knows directly from having achieved these direct realizations what it is that should be taken into practice and what should be avoided. And as he taught accordingly, he is the paragon of virtue or the great ascetic. He gave this teaching by means of the fearlessness of asserting his own perfect realization. So here, the Buddha has brought his own realization to its culmination, has understood everything exactly as it is. And therefore, with this fourth line, this is indicating then the fearlessness of asserting his own perfect realization.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was a genius. Magic by she and then our in best. Rasha get Tamjabalas. Ram magic by she and that is the top of you. The Panja did it, Yambo did it, about top to this. Oh, Shadala, but Tina she comes soon. Rangatina she comes in the Chonsons. sungbarwa rashen jiten tam jebala korjina do patsawa mebe se ti korma buna do tinde sungbala o tinde soso yende de mene yebe dene ngo chagra o tinde patsawa mebe jibwa mebe konde pa sungbi ore so sungbe rani je rani la tishin shebada kejon chembo she sungbade se ni kare ore kejon chembo she
계속
뭐야
송발라.
계정 첨부 소송소 저들이라 계정 첨부소 계정 첨부소
야당 십시쉐디.
어레 다다야 계정 첨부시 송배 민직바 시템바 인데서 어떤 민직바 시고네 쇼템바데 어디 계정 첨부다 근데 나그랑라 치도 전에 교요마데 세트스거라 야
So, in this way, the teacher Buddha possesses the good qualities of the four fearlessnesses and thus had no sense of unease in asserting his own and others' aims when among his disciples. So, here, because he has achieved these kinds of qualities, the Buddha has no trepidation, no sort of hesitation in proclaiming his own qualities among his disciples, because these are things that he has actually achieved. And so too, he is saying, I have done like this. And so if you follow as well, you can do likewise. So if someone were to make such a proclamation without any qualities, there would be a kind of problem. They would probably feel some fear, but a Buddha is able to do this because he has achieved those qualities. So therefore, when he called himself Tathagata and paragon of virtue, he was showing fearlessness in the sense of he has nothing to fear in asserting such qualities because he has them.
뭐야 근데 도대 쟁게 공장기도 도대 쟁게 롱장기 와라 라셰 된도세 담바산제 좀 된데 라니지 똑베 민직바 시부데 니바 인세 내 계란조 때나시 꼼다 니 연대도 톱투 그래 속여라 라셰 된도 이시다스 또바 표좀 써봤더라 라도르지네 아 판다스도 방법 표좀 써봤 담셔서 민중스도 자고 이 톱지게 람데 그런데 봐 매버서가 람데로와 대대버서 바제 티레스 방제데 티레스 어때도 정말 아니 라게 무슨도 캔지식 냠묘사네 테네 샬라 송바레서라 계제바라 던제서 어떤데 미지바 시고네 추템바레스 무대 샨다게스 무대 바샨다게 테네 좀 고다마 텐데 샤바데 마레스 샤체 소 견지 시투고 마레스 다음에 봐 마레 때 진짜 봐줘 마레 따요레 텐데 그 견수치네 봐 견주고 마레스 빠사왔네 미지 견지 시투고 마 견주고 마레스 겨라 차차로스 야 어디지 봐
So then, as a source for this, we cite Maitreya's ornament for the sutras, where he states, again, talking about the Buddha's four fearlessnesses, he says, you who teach the sublime wisdom, the abandonment, and the obstruction. So here there is the fearlessness with respect to having attained perfect abandonment, and who has attained this kind of sublime wisdom, referring to then the perfect realizations. So the Buddha possesses both those perfect or those excellent abandonments and realizations. So you who teach the sublime wisdom, the abandonment and the obscurations, and the definite emergence required for both one's own and others' aims are never disturbed by non-Buddhist philosophers. Homage to you. So here where it says, and the definite emergence, this is really the Buddha teaches then the path by which another being is able to follow to attain the same kind of perfect abandonments and realizations as him. And he is not sort of ever disturbed by the views of non-Buddhist philosophers who might assert that there is some kind of a self or a creator or others. The Buddha's knowledge accords with reality and thereby is never disturbed by those sorts of wrong views.
Oh, yeah, then you long dog. Tamati chizu chamba gombo te. Minji ne koto senge shense. Sanje chum dendegi minji ba shiko ne chote bate. Ne cornal tende sung batele ako. Jigba yo mare se pene senge de ruda cho namlia senge lepsune jigba mego na shere ese. She sung badar. Shaya tamba rani je panja kayen bada. Panja karen bada. Panja ponje gitab kayen ba chen ese. Kedar landor jebe Quran ke landor jebe rani ki pando tarshimbe yende nga watar pando tarshimbe na rani la yende te da da demba shen songshin tamjebe ne tujenam lagbar yi che shin ene deba da tujenam jatte dar landor la juba ba Jukabaya Yotosha, Jukabaya around to just go to the Langdoshan Tartu Lam Tetu, and then to top to grace, some jane, telling Juku, yeah.
So, as well, also by Maitreya from his Sublime Continuum or Tara Tantra, he refers to the Buddha as fearless like a lion among his disciples, praising him for these fearlessnesses. In the same way that a lion, in the midst of various other creatures like non-predatory creatures, would feel a kind of fearlessness. So too, the Buddha is able to, among his disciples, teach without any sort of fear. Furthermore, the Buddha had a purpose in stating the teachings with the four fearlessnesses. The teacher knew the obstructions and the method for eliminating them. He has no fear with respect to those. As he then accordingly engaged in adopting and abandoning, he acquired the good qualities of perfecting abandonment and realization. So because he thus had these good qualities, he taught them and asserted them to others. So thereby his disciples have exceeding faith and belief, and they also engage in adopting and abandoning. So the qualities that the Buddha was able to achieve, he is able to proclaim them fearlessly and thereby engender a kind of faith in his disciples who in turn will also pursue that same path, engage in adopting what is to be adopted and abandoning what should be abandoned.
Oh, yeah. Chönam tamje gyule chon sholo ga chi de tanda sheura. Dona chönam tamje gyule chon shiso chigan shibu don dinese ne ka konde gi shi temba shida. Chönam tamje gyule chon sadege 동해 temba de sheura. Tiju deshin shibu son so kunju temba she. Gyulan goba kan ba shide kan gogben gogba gogten she. Tim go che ge lamden che ti temba ni de sheura. Ni temba shi de shegyo rese. Konde ji shi temba shi da se. Tabdan shirab ji shi temba ni ge nam sha de o ti shegyo rese. Ani phagbe lam yala je so ji tabdan shirab ni da se. Phalam yala je la so lam shedu lam de shedu phalam yala ke shegyo ra. Te drebu pando thar shimbe chugu drebu de la pangba thar shimbe pangba phejo da toba phejo sigira. Ne music ba shi da dembe sugu temba ma se music be yende ngange ge sugu pando je de thar shimba sudu tobe yende to tegi wara chugu tegi to te da bo sanje chumde de la nga res to sugu tegi wara sugu sudu sanje be sugi ku mi namba chenne pa te ku de la sugu sigara chugu sudu na loge pangba ta yende shebe kembanye de la chugu sigara ishi chugu ngoni ku sigara konde je chönam kyumi do tawe chebar tawa to ti changma korwe chöna da nyangel debe chöna changma li gyo rese many kiggers, Yora, Jumeba Kande, Tambu Kande, Yamar, Kona, Ranshin, Tendeshu, Desser, or Tendemar, Samal, Resora. You go Samlotanda, Karesna, Tuyana, Tele, Tommy Rigger, some Tillo, Chugomara, Tambu Tunsa Chicores, and Tatinen Gotsun, Tital, Megere, Chicores, some Gura. Zambulin did a Cheneco de Tambu to such a Yokura. Chitansi Koa system just Tambu to such a Yokumaro, Tamebara, Teletamebara. Oh, in the Conde Chunam, Jumido Tawe, Chebertawa, or the Kangali Kuyor, Jumeba, Rangjungi, Rangshingi, Korata, and get your mares. Che de da Metumbe, you Takbala, your mares. Takbache, you the Takbache, and Debu Damida, you and the Yoya Marisera. Juchik Ranchik Matomache, Te Takbache, Te Kanga Service and Damida Kanga, Te Yoya Marisogora. Rara get Timu Maimbe, Yelling Jure, Kenji Chini, Mixe, Jukor Matochik, Te Takba Juchik Ranchik Tambo, Jigache Babu Rechinera, Takbe Juche Takbache, Tichi Jangage. Sama drama da kanga yo mares rara ke timu mai ben yelen ki chuta lenji chiken teni ke kure sungora sigora bitin be chu takba da debu ke wada thengi marwa debu ke de juro chen ten gora chudin jo ma je che ne jo chen debu ke to mar chi zo de takba yin si ti kanga chigre sti yo mar nang ba chen chi zo da Jidengi Chebabo, Tabo Ranjungi Chebabo, Tiga Kanga Servicena, Tiende Mara, Tende Mares, Nambachena. Oh, Nicholas. So let you two Gobada, so that you made Yoda. Kutakba, Chigi, and it Kangandamada Kanga, some Chever stand Gobaresera. Laluji Truta. Ralo je tukta yanda bor jogbe chunam tenjen deban juya chudu teldi chiga shi tamje na do tuti dem sholga chi dinal o tezu kanga de diyorese chunam tamje jule chung sede tagba da gyume do ma tindu yora tiji tishin shi tendu o tishilam na ya.
So, in short, this stanza of 4 lines, beginning the phenomena that arise from causes, and so on, indicates the basis of nirvana and cyclic existence, the 4 noble truths. So here, with the first line of that, where again, it begins with the phenomena that arise from causes, this is indicating the truth of suffering. And then the second line, where it says that the Tathagata proclaimed those causes, that is indicating the truth of the origin of suffering. And then in the third line, as well as their cessation, this is indicating both the truth of the path and then the true cessations that arise from that. And so here in this 4-line verse, it is indicating again the basis of nirvana and cyclic existence, the 4 noble truths, the basis of method and wisdom, the 2 truths. So we get into an understanding of ultimate and conventional truth, the 8-fold noble path, both method and wisdom. So the 8-fold path, the kind of methods that one needs to take up in order to be able to achieve such a cessation, and the goal of that, the truth embodiment that is the perfection of abandonment and realization, and the form embodiment possessing the 4 fearlessnesses. So here, the kind of result that comes from practicing the path is the form body of a Buddha, that is what it actually possesses those 4 fearlessnesses and teaches to others, as well as the kind of truth embodiment, both in terms of the wisdom truth body, the kind of realizations, and the nature truth body in terms of the abandonments which a Buddha has actualized. And so all of these are caused in the sense that as this verse teaches, everything arises due to causes. So in addition, it refutes the nihilistic view that sees the phenomena of cyclic existence and nirvana as having no cause. So here, when it comes to all sort of phenomena, our world and beings and so forth, we can talk about samsara as being in general beginningless. We can't point to a beginning to that. But when it comes to specific cycles of causality, we can indicate a beginning, a specific kind of cause, because nothing is coming about without any cause whatsoever. So here it is also eliminating the idea that there could be a permanent entity called time as the non-concordant cause of those phenomena. So again, it's refuting these kinds of wrong ideas and the way of things arising from a principal nature, a divine creator of the world, and so on. So here, this 4-line verse establishes that phenomena can't arise causelessly, nor do they arise from a discordant kind of cause, something like a single permanent cause, without the sort of unique substantial causes and the coordinating conditions. We can't talk about there being like one creator or principle that is somehow acting as the cause of everything. As the Buddha has taught, all phenomena depend upon both the substantial cause and coordinating conditions for them to come about. And so here, this teaching then eliminates those kinds of wrong views, like a creator God having brought about everything, or there being some sort of principal nature, and so on. So integrating the ways of correctly positing the tenets of our own system into the way of dependent arising, it gives a condensed presentation in just 4 lines. So all of these 4 lines contain multitudes, and they also eliminate the kind of wrong views of things arising causelessly or from a creator God or a discordant cause and so forth.
Oh, yeah. Tatena yet the man don't denies and number Shilam debut to shit and banies ara Lam Tapshinis and Debu Kunisigra Shilam debus, ya shit and Bashichan and Tambanichandera. She the Lambda Debu debut to Tawada to the Nambaki. A Chebaton Bass, Karakarilla Juku, Chebaton Bay. And a catch a shun signal, don't judge and put on Bashi in Bass. I shall look at you, she knew you, Chitanti, Tempento Mabu or I. Tajanam be don't they none and Dumbada, the canon done it to the Samutana to do share Dumbada. Ne, did some becone, they did to the Samutara. Kundo Yamlegi, Shondo Cheber Zenguba, Shindo Kechewa Sheber Shaw. Oh, yeah, Tene. I didn't know I said it should. Tension Deborah John with Chusilas, Tamashe Kanga, Tentation the Shera. And it chung say, some that tell us some Saba Naraju round of Jake Omara, Shumambun at Sutu and to Samutan Sut Shachira. And you get Suti, Deb Severa, the church, Deb Lasovache. And Chimba, the leg bomb. Parjabjani Chandal Pa Chimbatisura. Sona Mishi, Tony Canto de Tanda, Don Samlatan, do she so sagade, De Chandal Pa Panto inna, Sonam Jito Sagiora. Oh, Sona Mishi Tony Sona Mishi Tony Canto de Canto in a agent table Tessigora. And Ronam Tambaconi Tober shows. Tambakunis to Chugu Tamba, the Sugu Tambasigra. Chugu de Randun Chugu Sigra. Rani Pangba Tarshin, Kemba Tarshimbati. Pangba Datobe Yundani Butelia, Randun Chugu Sigra. Rani Tarshimbati Kurgura, Kansa Ranito. Sugu to the Shalapa, Rangi Kemba the Shal Tambalia, Chugu Sugu Pangba Datobani the Tank Omara, Musum to Tang Omara, Kansa Nabachepa. So good number 10 and she and soon this tango. I said, top jet so the Pemba Dunga so the Sugudi Redavara. Nazu got a shadow, chanju sem samlutandusa sobe chanju toban dobas pando tarchimbe sukus 근데 최근에 그 가사진 교화쇼스 뒤쪽 삼다게와라 이거지 가도데 네 존남 담바코니 토버쇼스 진리버샤 근데 간조 제데 레미 추주라 스타데 그 간제게 개바마부 참셰베 그 순간가 또로베시거라 추주라세 중세 저섬 공배 남관데 저바체 삼바체 삼로로 따한테부터 간조 제네 윤도 내버다 그 간제게 종게 사제 템바타 아르데비오 또 파탄다 균내야 된다다 간제 공부 자와름 버시는 간제 공부 꾸지 땡주지스 꾸지 에렌도 템베 주주지스 오야 티치빌로 땡디스
So therefore, this Dependent Arising Sutra, being an important scripture that reveals great meaning in a few words, captures the Buddhist view and conduct at the basis, path, and result or goal levels. So here, this then, in terms of this Dependent Arising Sutra, as well as the Rice Seedling Sutra, then reveals a great meaning in a few words, in that it captures the kind of teachings on the basis, the two truths, the path, method, and wisdom, and the result or the goal of the two Buddha bodies. And so here, although there are many sort of different teachings on dependent arising, this one really captures the kind of essence of that, and therefore we must always recite this sutra, and by reflecting on its meaning, we must always treasure it as a writing about practice. We must understand that to do so is extremely important. So here, having reflected on the importance of the teaching of dependent arising, we should really cherish this kind of text that is describing it, that is giving us this presentation. So here then we are going to skip to page 143, where we go to the dedication then. So here, by the two collections of merit and sublime wisdom attained through reflecting a little on the Dharma's method of dependent arising, as well as writing about it, explaining it, and worshiping its teacher, may all beings attain the two supreme embodiments. So here, the kind of merit that we have gained through reflecting on this text, through writing about it, reading it, explaining it, and so forth, is not something that is done from like our own side, based upon sort of our own ideas, but really based upon having engaged with these teachings of the Buddha. And by doing so, we gain a great amount of merit. We add to our collections of merit and wisdom, which in turn lead to the resulting two supreme embodiments. So when it comes to the Buddha bodies, the truth body or the Dharmakaya is really considered to be the perfection of our own aims. That isn't something that others can interact with, but it is the form body, the Rupakaya, that we are striving for as the main means to fulfill the aims of others, to be able to teach others through an embodied kind of a form. We're making that kind of wish. May I become a being who is able to teach this, to convey this to others. And then by the virtue of studying, reflecting, and meditating a little on the Dharma's method of being unbiased toward the conqueror's teachings in the land of snow. So these teachings that have been carried on in Tibet, may the conqueror's teachings of the land of snow remain for a long time. And may the snowy land's protector, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama Tenzin Gyatso, live a long time. So that is the dedication that I have composed.
Oh yeah, that did it was it. Oh, that is solution bento lingju di sora. Oh yeah. Oh, that is it was it. That is that chema section. That is it. Don't let do the march to us. Lost shadow some give us. Don't that the share side. Dynama. Tarshima, ropes, lotion. Oh yeah. Some give. That's all. Oh, that shall Sidamba, Sirade, Jagarake, Arya Shali, Sidamba, Nam Mahayana Sutra Sira. Oh, did Arya Sana, Papa Yamba, Shali Sidamba Sana, Solin Changbarwa, nam se shechara. Maha Sutra, Dochira, Mayan Sutra, Tebachimbindo in Shera, Tindibuche. That Pelgedo Papa Salu Jamba Shecha, Tebachimbindo, Ostia. That day, Lomo Cheshirashi. Sanja de Chanju Samba Tamjala Chacha Lose, Debato de Lozawage, so Jurgendia, Oshara, do Ming the Che, Dokari Kurki Tindi Sigara, and the Soluja Bedo. Dele chacha, sajle chanju se batam chacha. Loza wa kyunge de hira. Dan donglu shi de dige daga to ba tuchi na se. Dan de ka dua bo de hira, ka dua bo de se gara. Sanje nyanglen de sane ka tene sunga tambu yigil me da chema kar kar so pabgi wara. O tidu zane de kasra. Da de ka du tele no bangbu wara. Jidan Dr. Katuchena, I'm watching it. That table champion daughter China doji curious set up today or a cut to say about it. Jidan Jene go in Yako, the Yusun with the Tura. Jidan to Diane and the table champion dokaji to China doji, what to do, and do it. Dige dage toba teaching ase o dige wone she tanda kanga dotendro an didan dishi chawa ane dage toba ase ane teaching ase nge teaching la teso se chane dige wala yane teaching na chumden so oman ma teaching de chumden de jebe ka teaching na chumden de jebe ka la shu so se dige je yana social ya chana dage toba teaching na se de Tuba Chamber Doctor de Tuba Pay, Calacabore, Lengic to Son Sarabchi, Del Jare. At Tujina said the Cabicos Macharina, some then the Cabical shoes on say, Tujin at the shoes and Tushan Shando, Drawet on the Shanda Shanda Pair of Tindakudia. Tujina, some then the Cabicup said the Ming, not on the Kashet the Wa, Kashesana, Kashana. Gebu kapsede, gebu ming lamna, mingitana, ne mimayo to the men barata, meshoya to the mimayin barabatin drag, never seen Bargi Bequicida, or Tinde Meoka, Memabara, Meshoya, come back and the Memabushoya, the measure gebu ming yonako, the Tarayo, today's and the Tabese. A peasant one and all the day of Gudua. Gebu Meshone, and the gebu trimchedoa. Oh, Tane Sunday suit on what to subscribe, Meshona, Tanda Gabuka, you said to do Satomba in Sera, Satomba and Italia, and come back up Kuchu in Das, a show mess. For the Tanda Gabuka, you said Satomba till come back up, tell the wrong years. Now the Mishona say, Labres. The Gabukona come back Meshore. Oh, this is all that Gabu. Tim Jessar, Tapu, the mother dream, my rank Tim's rank man in a dream, I say, Gabu take, Gabu put on take out, and they do lumber the Kanga to shout. Gabu cup said, take a share. Oh, to do that. You got out to do the swim that the Gabuco. Chagu Pumbu realize. Chagu Pumbu said, Chagu Rito. Nabura chair and go to Dodo and Nabura, you're a Chagu Mamu Pum, they were not draw some the Chagu Pumbu is Yashara. It's a good pombe like hello. What about the chicken? Yeah.
So now we are going to turn to just reading through the sutra itself. And so here I'm going to follow the one that's at the beginning of the book. And so we will, we've already had the chance to give commentary on this, but just to read through the actual sutra. So it begins, and we sort of do this out of order in the English, but we start with the Rice Seedling, a Mahayana Sutra. And so then we have the title in Sanskrit and the title in Tibetan. And then this is followed by homage to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So all of this would have been by the translator. That homage to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is the translator's homage, and then they have put the name in both the Tibetan and the Sanskrit. And then we turn to the beginning of the actual sutra, which begins with the line, "Thus I have heard on one occasion when the Blessed One was staying at Rajagriha on Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great assembly of monks," and so forth. And so here, when we begin with this, "Thus I heard on one occasion," this is referring to, again, there were times when the Buddha's teachings were compiled. The Buddha's teachings originally were all preserved orally, and they came together, and there were various councils. We don't need to get into all of the kind of history of that, but there were various councils, and those, including Ananda and Kaishyapa and those kinds of beings who had heard these teachings, then compiled them together. Now, here, when it comes to the teachings of the Buddha, we see sometimes that there are teachings that were given by, say, Vajrapani or other kind of figures, but the main compilers were humans who were students of the Buddha, who then came together in these councils in order to determine what the teachings were. And so then we have this phrase of "on one occasion." Now, sometimes we would have that in reference to the Blessed One on one occasion was staying in such and such a place. But here, because it's associated with the "thus I heard," it's getting at the kind of rarity of hearing this. This is something that was only heard just once. Now here, when it comes to this place, Rajagriha, there is a story about how at a certain time the king made like an edict or a law that if someone's house were to burn down, they had to they could rebuild in this place, Rajagriha. This is something that is like sort of held by the king. But it turns out that the king's palace actually went up in flames, and he himself was like forced to follow his own rules and then move to this particular area. So we that's just a little bit of a side history. But then why it's called Vulture Peak, or sort of heap of vultures mountain, is because the sort of rocks that make up this mountain almost look like vultures themselves.
Oh yeah. Oh, didn't it? Kelong tong nyejang abju kelong je kendu chenpo tang asudwa. Kelong che tong nyejang abju yo de chera. Dim dong mambu na yong gudwa. O de chi lamda yabu yu de. De che tong nyejang abju se kante sigura se na. Sanje chumden de che tangbo sar na te. Ane che son de koranga ma do yo marwa. Chidam me che ne tongzu koranga te sambu se ra. Tene sanje che son de ta kante se lab gudwa konde. 아니 케바 도중엘이야 추수에 나래 힌두 케바 망보여라 케바 망볼로마 망보여서 도졸레 트와틀레체 딜 송에 송고야래 대인데 근데 깨다 최선다고 대두자 신도가 네 땡게 위송세게 지어래 땡게 위송세 출롱 위송세게 지어래 봐 아니 가야 위송세 뭐도 가야세 가야 위송세게 지어래 네 셔리 부채 몽게기 부채 건조 너무 망보 자가 텐데 텐상에 누가 건조 리그레 시제 건조 롱바치를 돈에 너무 망보체 소스 콩콩 가가래 중다 근데 제 너무 망보 연계 개바 최수장이라 에터줄라 저들레 제제 수행 고츠래 어때저도 건조 넘바 상계기 중리야 대야부도 삼제 상계기 진주 너무 차도래 근데 상계 건조 가반도는 대냠도 너무 현대 도서 연구는 대소 남바 차도네 디샤네 장거들랍고도와 맞도 참상들레 또스망 또스녀가 요시그라 또 입장갑 주세데 고저 로만 입장갑 중갑 주체바 나 중소아 어디래 내 책도 입장갑 주래서라 어디래 개별가 아가서 결론도 입장갑 주 결론게 근데 침보다 가서 결론이 기둥이 초침부서라 장가만 붙게지라 자주 선바 첨부 라도 마무다다 자주 선바 마무 단냠도 슈버레세 근데 대세 좀데 어디 봐도 질람나 다 붙이죠.
So then continuing with the Blessed One staying at Rajagriha and Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great assembly of monks, 1,250 monks, and very many bodhisattva great beings. So here, this is indicating, we know that when the Buddha first attained enlightenment, he only, his first teaching was given to his five formerly sort of fellow aspirants who became his disciples. And then as time went on, the Buddha the audience for the Buddha's teachings began mostly as like Hindu scholars, as those who were sort of more scholarly beings who would get together and kind of discuss these things. And over the course of time, we can see how there are many various scholarly beings who acted as disciples of the Buddha, and those like Malgadhyayana and Shariputra and so forth. Over time, the number who are disciples, who are followers of the Buddha, then would increase more and more. So we sort of see how they might get together for these kinds of like conferences, discussions, and eventually then they end up following the Buddha's teachings. And so from those 5 original disciples, we're now at a point, and we see that at the beginning of sutras, there's slightly different numbers of how many there were in attendance. And this really is indicating that the extent to which the Buddha's teachings have been adopted and spread. And so there was that assembly of monks as well as a very great, very many bodhisattva great beings.
Oh, they do so. Jidang ko chue de tambo she do ya tabshin da mamu do wa ka she jidang milia she mi ko ndo ten de la she ro ro no ne ka she yang ji ko tambo ne ka so de da de bu che de mo che o ya de bu che da chang ju sem ba o de so se chang ju sem ba chang ba chen bu ma de ba kelon ton ge ja kindu chenbu de so chaju sembe kindu chenbu rabdo mamu to tapchu de shu de ese lenji de shu de ese chedo de ba sheri chaju semba sem boda de ya teba chembe do yana ne kelon do de ngele labdo ase che ngele labete chere chinenge de la gora cosa che ene di chaju semba to chisu labdo ase Janju sembe tekwa sembe do ne nyenge do de janju sembe mare de ngele la gu mare ser to wa ara tele ane kindu kelon do chumden de chung do tu gyundu ne mangcha de shogu ara sanje chesa janju sembe do che san ne pa zu peje che shi shenda le sha ga mangcha da jiden kam shenda shen ne chumbe janju sembe mambu yo sembe ara o ti de ko kindu so cha ku shap cha da ene chumden de chung do tu gyundu na nam gyu shung ge de so za ti nge le la yin so ra chi wa to da la jang ju sem ba to zo ne chi shu ya shen da ba sim je to de shen da ba cha so chi ge wa de so tin de chan yin se ra chung do oh yin ba cha ti chi lab sha na tu chen.
So here then we get to the sort of specific setting. At that time, Venerable Shariputra went to the promenade of Maitreya, the Bodhisattva great being. Now here, just to step back for a moment, we have again this description of this assembly of monks, 1,250 monks, and a very many Bodhisattva great beings. And so someone might wonder, I mean, the Buddha teaches in many sort of different guises, in many different ways, in accordance with the needs of disciples. And now here, when it comes to this and describing first that there's this great assembly of monks and then followed by and a very many bodhisattva great beings, someone might think, well, if this is a Mahayana sutra, then why are the bodhisattvas not mentioned sort of first? Why is it that they aren't put first? Well, the thing about bodhisattva disciples is that their primary concern is really teaching to others, being able to go out and give the Buddha's teachings to others. Now, the reason that a great assembly of monks, the Sangha, is mentioned first is really to indicate the importance of having respect for the Sangha as being those who are carrying on the teachings of the Buddhas. So we shouldn't sort of look at this as being out of order or something, in that there's a purpose in having that first and then going to the Bodhisattva great beings.
Yeah, ling lang ba se ra ani kar nang so se thap che du so kar nang so tan den so se ling lang ba se de do den de che dan den ba shari e bu se ro chang ju sam ba chen bu chang be de ba cha we cho ka la wa de song de chen ne pen ju yang da ba ka wa cha we tam nam ba ma bu che ne de de yi ga do li la ko do se ra tan de 장주 선바 잠발을 찍고도 주요 주서리 잠발에도 아주 실업님 부인의 제대시 지제용도 장주 선바 잠발이야 네 샤리부 저와 틀려체는 도대 연구하라 뒤엔데고 샤리부로와 샤리부 다들 샤라세데 르그라지 미서 아마데 미서라 네 샤리부스 마 샤리 부인바나 샤리부라 이제라 장주 선바 첨보세 장주 선바세데 라나 메베 장주라 선바세 게 랑게 돈다 지부 마이바 심제 탐제게 돈 주베게 쳇도 선바 선자 선바 첨보세다 지다 장주라 선바데 년도에 장주라 선바로 년도에 장주 랑제제 장주 요르와 타르와 요르와 년도에 타르와 랑제 타르와 요르도 지다 년도에 장주 랑제 장주 요레 이나 tekpa chenpe chanchu sampa chanchu sampa chenpo sede. Nyarangi chanchu sampa tadu chanchu la sampa tedang nimandra resi. De sampa tamje ka chan tuwe shido sampa sonza te sikdo sampa chenpo sede. Ini kardo sedang damba sharibu chanchu sampa chenpo chambe tuwe chawe cho kalawa ter sonde chanchu sampa chamba pasu uyara pasu de Koran sharibu de tinjamdo nyamdo paanduwa de se chokala sonde. Tade dirachine. Penzu kawar jawe nam namba mambu chede. Penzu da chindu mendu sira. Tandil tiyore. Namasudu sarabu tende chege omare. Di thai meba re sigora. Chikba yene namasudu chegumare se. Tatensa ina to kanjumba chu cha cha chegora. Kawar jawe pa chindu mendu kecha mambu shane ne. 전다 진념도 주어지고요라. 가버져에 땅 망보체는 뒤에 니가 돌려라 그래도 돌려블리치와는 버려. 아니 뒤가데 대래. 땡상보다 된를 주어질 때 개심 붙이네. 마도 다 대고래 대키슈세 등가 줄에네. 대접지 저오라. 전에 맞지. 돌려간리가 쉬우네네. 개심부 주어질 때 제래서 된다라. 어디보다 전도나.
So, here, then we begin this section that starts with "Thus I have heard on one occasion," through that first paragraph. Then, and very many Bodhisattva great beings is a sort of basis for the discussion that will come. And then, when we get into at that time the Venerable Shariputra, the sort of specific discussion that is going to be taken up then begins. So here we can see that the setup is that in this case, at that time, Venerable Shariputra went to the promenade of Maitreya, the Bodhisattva great being. And so here, when it comes to the kind of exchange that is going to take place, it will be between Shariputra and Maitreya. Like in the Heart Sutra, it is Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara. Now, Shariputra, just to give a little bit about his name, Putra means the son of. So, well, yeah. I'll try not to get too much into the details, but Shari was probably his mother's name. And so then when we have this, the Bodhisattva, the great being, the word like that we often use with Bodhisattva, Changchub Sempa, the Changchub, the enlightenment, this one having the thought of enlightenment. Enlightenment can refer to any of the three levels, that of a hearer, a solitary realizer, or of a Bodhisattva. But the reason why they are called like a great being, we often see, is because of the greatness of their aspiration, of aspiring for that state of not just their own liberation, but being able to benefit all sentient beings. Their thought is for all sentient beings and thereby is great. And so now we get to this kind of on his arriving, they exchanged many pleasantries. So Shariputra and Maitreya, make their sort of greetings of one another. It's not necessarily super formal. And then having met, they sat together on a stone slab. So unlike our sort of modern settings where we think, oh, we need to put a special like cushion and have a special setup, here they are just sort of sitting on this stone slab and then have this exchange.
Oh yeah. Tene tsetan tenpa shari pi chanchu senpa senpa chenpo chamba la degeji me so se ta cho che ra. Chamba se ten deri chom ten deji salu jangpa la se ne kyalon nam lan do de sun so se. Kyalon da su tenjin rebar chunga tonga de che tongo su che tonga de sanje tongo she ka che ne chom ten de chang me sun war. Jurna chamba tewar shebe ka che be ene do de tenchi kyalon da su tenjin rebar chunga ne ka che ne ka sanje ne ka she na se. O ta de ling shi de 좀 된데게 설륜 장발신이 신가가 달리치 배교사라 신가가 오라 기대 신가가 달라 배네네 제기 장방고 배 신방고 야부께 되는데 오란 대신 야 텔레시네네 산제게 결론다 결론도 냠도 연계 소리야 텔레 주네 결론다 수 땡진 레버리 좀 통디 컨데 야부께도 스큐단 캔을 텐데스 수 땡진 레버리 좀 통하데 최통호스 수 최통하데 산제 통호스 아 o tende sore ti sone ne changma sore tenje de ban joa de kare tenje de ban joa tone chue kare chue tone sanje kare ke ma sore ta sanje kare kombarasana chanju samba chambalia konje tiwini ti shen go re kongare chanju samba ti kare sana masumba kare sana o te kelon mabu che tende sara sanje sumba o sanje sum gangang e ko ye samsa ngaja yo sarwa sante sumba changma ko yo mare chanju samba to lodo chewa ta to ya bu shingi yo bare chi ta chewa ta ya ton dalya ene changma so de so ta chambe jo tele chen ne ko ra she do re kong bare je son do ren do ra sanje gi che su na wa chambe jo tele chen chen de she do re kong ja ten do ran do yo ra ngo su sanje ke so ge wa mare ten do ga sa 어디래 간시나세 어때지 주나 산제네 간 지들 된지 레바주와 돈나 최통 지들 최통은 산제 통 저저 컨데레세 야 저저래 되게시 매바다서 어디부터 진도잖아.
So then the sort of the discussion then that takes place begins with then the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva great being Maitreya. And so he's describing this kind of scene wherein Maitreya, here today, the Blessed One, after looking at a rice seedling, spoke this to the monks. So here it's likely that the Buddha was walking by some kind of a rice paddy and seeing these rice sprouts, this nice green. He sort of pointed them out and made this statement. So he said to the monks, "Monks, he who sees dependent arising sees the Dharma. He who sees the Dharma sees the Buddha." And so after saying that, though, he didn't say anything else. So after saying that, the Blessed One said nothing more. So now Shariputra is asking, Maitreya, what is the meaning of that sutra spoken by the Sugata? What is dependent arising? What is the Dharma? What is the Buddha? How does one see the Dharma if one sees dependent arising? How does one see the Buddha if one sees the Dharma? So here, the Buddha, really in teaching to those with the sharpest kind of faculties, has just pointed this out. He says only that he who sees dependent arising sees the Dharma, and he who sees the Dharma sees the Buddha, knowing that this is really only accessible to those who are of highest faculties. Now, many might sort of like pridefully try to claim that they understand whatever the Buddha is saying, but here Shariputra, in his sort of humility, is admitting that he doesn't understand and is asking to Maitreya, what is the intention of the Buddha? So the sutra, that which is actually spoken by the Buddha, is then what Maitreya will respond to here.
Oh yeah, it is. Oh, yeah, this one. 제가 지금 어디다 전주 선바 첨부 잠베스 발렌자 그러다 세단된 바샤라다 데볼 되게 지메소 슬렌데를 소죠 선바샤리부 데라 좀 된데 최제다부 어선제 좀 된데 최상마가 다부들을 나다를 상마 경계들을 소라 다부 탐제 캠바스 랑도나 탐제 캠 결론다 수iten진 레버는 좀 통화대 최통어세 수출 통화대 안되는 만들 제거라 수출 통화대 산재 통어세 연락 땡진 레버는 좀 가래스다 말라지도 안되네 용서 쉐버지 자와대 제거라 쉐자대 용서 쉐버지 자와 링시 링랑바 용서 쉐버지 자와 쉐고야 되다 쉐거라 용서 쉐버지 자와 어디 땡진 레버는 좀 안에 강셔나 땡진 레버는 좀 쉐자와네 데이터에서 산재 손배 땡진 레버는 좀 수iten진 레버는 좀 통나 최통호 사이 땡진 레버는 좀 데디레스 가래스나 디여벤 디종사 교단께 디여베 데분디 조고데스 교단께 매는 조고 말해서 디께베신 디게 교단께 코란딘 교와친 게지 소다 미다바소다 데데부데 교로체는 미다바시키 그래서 교단께 바다 미다바 도메켄레 좀 도시에도와 어제데 디여벤 디종세 교단께 디여벤 디종세 교메도 껴와도 그거라 디께베신데 교딱먹게 깨요 말에 교코나데 미다바 교로친게 연례된 렌지 치긴 소네 이 데부데 깨워라 아시도 교딱바 치게 제바부 치게야 가서래 치소이나 다 지네 제바부이나 다 가는 딱바 치라 치게 상바 제부데 파가 미다바 또 메게래 좀 교코나 교와친시면은 데부께 또 말해서 네 가서래 디께베신 디게 간데 마리베켄지 두지나 때도 뉴베켄라 때서 그러나 팀무 많이 봐 교창면 데부 상맞게 또 말해 그러나 팀무 많이 봐냐래 교대 계시시기 교대게 팀무 많이 데부 시키 그래마도 교창면 데부 탐지기 말와 네버 소송 예배 네베 교라 때서라 두지 남세 두지기 ken지 따든데 할래 중이 사게라 마리베켄지 이번 두지기 레게 와 토메 마르바 다지 왕이번 두지기 레사 차다게 왕게 네 두지기 ken지 넘버 쉐바 레야 박차샤 로 네 넘버 쉐베 ken지 민다수 시바 메수디투 민다수기 ken지 계제도 아니 메기 계제 나게 계제 내 계제를 써봐 왕부터 되게라 계제도 계제를 때네 계제 ken지 소라 계제에 계제 ken지 렉바 전에 유라야 유다 왕부 남셰숨 체조 체서 렉바스 촉바들 렉바스 민다셔라 렉베 ken지 소라 유제 유수제 명화제로 근데 남셰숨 체서는 다 고치 소로를 지거라 소보고 렉자리 지나고 소인을 소르게 와라지 렉베 ken지 소라세 소레 ken지 세바 소아 종소나 될 때는 소아 소수 펜반도게 네반도게 펜네 매버에 섬티 소르도 와 소아대와 동에 당뇨세 된 거라 ken지 세바 세베 ken지 렘바 세바데 유드 가서 소아대 종소는 동에 종소는 제가 트레나 섬 세바 기거라 대와 종소는 메드나 섬 세바 기거라 당뇨에는 고템무 헤드마도 텐데 차나리 기고 말 기회 ken지 렘바세 렘베 ken지 시바세 슈바 시벨레네 바투젠티 시베 ken지 껴와 슈바 시베 ken지니 껴와 치말하도라 기회 ken지 가시 깨바데 시월서 전에 냥에 심게 심대시 냥에다 민가도 바다 동해 존에 뭐에다 또 칸내치다 시기를 봐가지고 또 좋으나 동해와 다시 류지 동해 이지 동해들 이메대 와다 축반하면 좋아지도 축바셔야 돼 전에 공도가게 차도 렌심라서 셈투도라 뒤축바 녀모 망부게 돼야 되시거라 축반하면 좋은데 대다른 동해지 풍부체부 마시바데 좋아지로 어떨 때는 동해지 풍부 첨부 동해지 풍부수도 망부게저와 첨부수도 통마매바네 저 통마매바네 단도부도 용대요 나세 첨부 마시수도 다 매바 Rawe ta meba, kumbutu chung resi wara. Rawe ta da nyamdu tina zuni yunga ma resi. Kumbu bashiba de chung gyurus, o tiba do chindona.
Mhm. So then, in response to Shariputra's question here, once this was said, the Bodhisattva, great being Maitreya, said this to the Venerable Sharadvati Putra, Reverend Shariputra, the Blessed One, the Lord of Dharma, so the Buddha being the one who has this kind of mastery, understanding of the Dharma, who understands everything, the omniscient one, said, monks, he who sees dependent arising sees the Dharma. He who sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. And so if, regarding that, you ask what dependent arising is, it is as follows. So he's going to then explain this completely to Shariputra. And he says then, the Buddha has explained, so if regarding that, you ask what dependent arising is, it is as follows. Because this exists, this occurs. Because this arose, this arises. This is called dependent arising. So here, by giving this kind of presentation, when we see because this exists, this occurs, this indicates that both causes and results are impermanent. And because they are impermanent, it eliminates that there could be, well, first, this kind of declaration that because this occurs, or sorry, if this exists, this occurs, and because this arose, this arises, that eliminates the idea that there could be production that is causeless, that all of these phenomena come about without any sort of a cause. And so, too, it eliminates that there could be some kind of a permanent cause, whether that is some sort of a creator god or whether it is some sort of a principle and a nature. Neither of those are possible. So we also need to have as will be kind of explained as it comes. So that is dependent on ignorance, conditioning factors occur, and we'll go through these 12 links. But this is also indicating that a cause needs to be efficacious. It needs to actually be able to bring about that specific result. So it has to be an effective cause, an impermanent cause, and not just a single cause, actually, but causes and conditions coming together. So here it says then that is dependent on ignorance, conditioning factors occur. So when we have this ignorance, due to that, we have attachment towards our side, aversion for the other, and thereby create karma. And karma, those conditioning factors, dependent on conditioning factors, consciousness. They lay down a kind of imprint on consciousness. And dependent on consciousness, there is then name and form. And dependent on name and form, the six sense bases. And dependent on the six sense bases, contact. So then when we have the coming together of, for example, form, a visual, consciousness, and the eye sense power, those three things, then we can have sight. And so too, when we have the coming together of those, then we have contact. And dependent upon contact, there is feeling. We have a feeling of pain, pleasure, or a neutral kind of a feeling. And based upon that feeling, dependent upon feeling, there is craving. So if it is a suffering kind of a feeling, there's a craving to be freed from that. If it's a happy sort of feeling, there's a craving to have that, to keep that. And in turn, this then leads to grasping. So dependent on craving, grasping, a kind of intensification of that. And dependent upon grasping, becoming. Dependent on becoming, then that karma which has been nurtured leads to birth. And dependent on birth occur aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, misery, unhappiness, and conflict. So here, rather than just the last link of aging and death, there's also the kind of sorrow and then the lamentation or verbal expression of that. The sort of misery referring to more of our physical misery, and then unhappiness, the kind of mental dis-ease that comes, as well as conflict, all of the kind of disturbance that we have within our mind, jealousy and anger, and all of those things come from this. this. So this entire great heap of suffering occurs in this way. And so the entirety of this is not a sort of causeless or any of those other problematic assertions, but rather occurs in this way. This is the causal process that leads to it.
Oh yeah. Tell a maribang gagwen to jing gash to atinema. Oh, de garesno de Chita marikba Kudwa, Niban Duchi led Debudwa. Some marikba gadu Duchi Kungagba and Debu de Keko Yara. Kungagba and Debu de Kewa Tunyamba Gora. Tantan did Gagba said the Timare. Pena Sabin Gan in Yuguchegora, Sabin Mangan in Yuguchegomara. And then the Karsosana Namjan Chogi tended the Shegora. Dame Bangusum to Tone, Dame come the Dame Bangusum to Tosona, and a Tome Maribate, God who is the Conivation to Gora. Nimbo never cherish Rosonate, with each other Tinga, Tizin Yoruchin, Niparuchin Mabachag, Tilokora. Maribanga said, Nimbo top chambuchane. Tomba Nimusum to Tobe, Shitty, Yavukation and Maripade, God who is never shadow this or the virtual do this. Marik by the man, I didn't even do less. I obtained the virtual do that, or telecobra. Number Shebanga de la Marik Bangabe, Dujingabe, number Shebanga, number Sheba. Number Shebangabe, Minda Sungabe, Nicol Sura, Minda Sungabe. Geshe Tungabe, Regbangabe, Soangabe, Sebangabe, Lembangabe, Sibangabe, Kyoangabe, Kashida, and Yangeda, Mingadumba, Tungeda, Yemedewada, Chuba, Semlenimo Mabu, Sem Chudu at Chuba Nam Gaban, you did. The Dar Tungaji Pumbu Chambo. Mambo, Tunga Mambo, you get Pumbu, Chambos in the Toma Mebanega. But she by the Gavan, you rose, oh, round the target tombe, Pumbu by she by the guard over the oh, Dibba to children. Jenny jumped in there, what a deal of it. Jenny jumped in there, danger, the Barajo, I say so, Dibba to London. I'm trying to get tended some good watch. She did couldn't Yamocho tended. Maribalitation teaches couldn't Yamocho there. Diga and Diga is the Namjan Chogi tended, Tametone. Namjan Chogi tended some good hangapata.
So then it turns to likewise, with the cessation of ignorance, conditioning factors cease. Now here we need to be clear that this is a description of the purified side of the 12 links. It's not like in general, when we talk about something like that is cause and result, the cause needs to cease before the effect can come about, right? So we're not speaking in that sort of way, wherein like a seed needs to cease before there can be a sprout. It's not in that kind of capacity that we're talking about cessation here, but rather it is through the application of a direct countermeasure or a direct antidote. So by developing the kind of direct realization of selflessness that counteracts that ignorance, eventually we can reduce the force of it, completely eliminate it, cause it to cease. And so here, this is a description of then the thoroughly purified side of dependent origination, the 12 links of dependent origination, as above it was the thoroughly afflicted side. So here we need to be clear that it's not just talking about cessation in general, but through the application of an effective antidote. So with the cessation of ignorance, conditioning factors cease. With the cessation of conditioning factors, consciousness ceases. With the cessation of consciousness, name and form cease. With the cessation of name and form, the 6 sense bases cease. With the cessation of the 6 sense bases, contact ceases. With the cessation of contact, feeling ceases. With the cessation of feeling, craving ceases. With the cessation of craving, grasping ceases. With the cessation of grasping, becoming ceases. With the cessation of becoming, birth ceases. And the cessation of birth brings the cessation of aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, misery, unhappiness, and conflict. This entire great heap of suffering will cease in that way. So all of this suffering, the entirety of that is something that is solely causally created. And so thereby, when the causes are eliminated, it will also cease. So this, the Blessed One calls dependent arising.
Oh yeah. That church conscious asset. They also shiver seven Jebulana Yuba to take you ara. Shija, you also shiver seven Jebulana Yuba. Tikona Yuba says, Sira. Thank you. Church conscious. Pagbe Lamiana Jebati is a Palamia Ket Sigora. Jebati is a Yanda Bengas. The Pagbe Lamiana Jebas, Yanda Bengas. Nagi le number tabe Kebasura, Pagbe Ishi Jagdoa. Pagbe Consalmato Mabri. Tambote. Yanda be Nagi le number tabe Pagbe Kebasura. Any Yanda be legi. This one. Oh, they did that. Yanda be Tawasha. Tombani Tobola Soba, Yanda be Tawatisha. Pagbelam Yana did that. Yanda be Tawasha. Tombanilla Soba Toba without Yanda be Tawasha. Tawati Shala Tunjing Akune Logic. Kembachiwara Tisido. Yanda be Nasi. Nagi le number tabe Kemba. Yanda be legi tasu, and Luigi le number of Bekimba. Yanda be toas to Lunga Nige le number of Bekimba. Yanda be toas to Lam Koma, Tobala Chundrishi, Pagbe Lamdil. Yanda be Tembas to Ongamas or Tanget that to do Yanda by Temba. Yanda be Tingit, I tell in Yambasha Tingit. And it did Pagbe Lamyala Jabashi Chate, or Telepalamyala Chess. Until I sit down Pagbelam Yala Geshe or Palamche. Arazo Yamso Lanjas in the middle of the Drebana Yongutua Commissioner. Take a reason. Yanda be Tawas to the Susu Beta Dungeton Tamila Soba, Kadishingu until Yanta Betawasi, Ayana Legend de la Soba to Kanga, Tindil Church, Yanda Betawasi. Yanda Betobasi, Tawati Ragged Tobade. Kuna lonje ke tokba shandala ya tembar shebala so nga kuna lonje toba yanda be nga sede ene chela soba nga ge chama chizo nga jela soba te zo pane ro ene nga ge kone shala tembala soba tawa te zo yanda be leje tase luji kone soju machimba lemba loyem la soba te zo pambe kone. Oh, never tell you. Yanda be Yanda be choice the Lunga Nige let number of vacation. Delia teach out. Yanda be choa Ludanga Niga con the social message del Chara. Yanda be choa Timdan Gala, Lungbe Timdan Gala Soba, Sochebola Soba, Miglive, Legacene, and Chala Sane, Lutsudapchia de Madira. Oh, the Lunga Niga Gene, Mikiwa to the Pambecone, and Lungbe Timdan Gala Soba, Lord Temperature, Sojuchen, Lutsoyata, Simjan Sen, Lutsoyala Soba, Tibecone, Lunga Yusum Cone, Tibasabacone, Sutap Sera. Missike Tapshisha, but the young double saw us. Timber Timber, Benjo to read the young double, make you at the Madriba Church, Yahucha Social College of Social Peshasana, young double saw the Dora, or this delicious. Young double saw us. Young double saw us the Terra, Narma, that's a Minyaba, so at the Yondesabato to the Central Chicoya. Young double Tembase. And I to some massive chain of the temper. Temper does a cadina, Tication Bissera, not the Tempanisha, Semato, like a courage and associated at the Chebecable, teaching you some triangle. The man and tongue can go into Hakudoa. Duties and cheat attendance, or teaching some subsuggestion, object reach at the Chigmadoa. Could temper the attention. nangme che shanda samudang chene tabche ridro che reche yungdwa sa kari ina ko lega kari chena nga titi tanda ti chiga yoyo sam mota tanga yoyo sam chamba chamba shanda samshira tamidwa ti tanda ina nodri ngolo che nyagadwa sa kaa lega kari chena ronan drugu yoyo samsa yangde yangdo chilo kyabdo su tas che shanda yungumidwa shanda ina tabchigira ina rang drugu yoyo sam komba kyadu si ti sem tempo chayal pengidowa pengiwara yetin namjune tisi yang desan kachuma samchi drugu dosi chikalpa changare kyabna nga zo unjungu changa jadi zana ko sem tempo chayal pengidowa o tina shinche kadu ina sem deko adigade mangda ya dindis ya dabe chamba che ne kabando o ya dabe tsowa che ya dabe chamba che ya dabe tinginje de wade garanzo namju bar samutana tende yala chuni samutana da to kanga komja da tinga jo shemgudo komme te pe mandara chune chi kom hacha ti ora chamba komja chawa komja chaju sem komchore komja manda chi komgi o marmado tende yala chuni ko akordan kolu to samutana thoma mevne samutana semle jura dugra semle chi kujo tebgire tosa ko chai shana te ke kujo tes yo mara deso oh de kasre wale so yada be tingi se chen dine pabelam yala je ba she cha de se debu toba da se dan debu palam yala che de ko ne debu topse ke lamda tobe nyang de le so ba o te zo kanga chik du tu de ni chom den de che se de palam yala che da ti komba le tene tobe tarwa le so ba o te debu tu kanga ya che se kres ti ba de chi.
So, this continues saying, what is the Dharma? And here it is the noble eightfold path. Really the kind of, this is the correct sort of understanding, the noble eightfold path that represents the sort of correct knowledge of a Buddha. Anyway, so here we'll go through this. It says, namely, right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So here, these represent the kind of resultant results that are attained by someone who has practiced this. But this is also the kinds of things that we ourselves need to take up into practice. So right view here refers to a kind of correct view of the way that things are. So the correct view of emptiness, but also an understanding of impermanence and suffering and so forth. And based upon having that kind of understanding, that right view, then that translates into how we think about things in terms of the thoughts that motivate our speech and our actions. So right thought is really having realized the way that things are through that kind of right view that translates into how we think about things. And then in turn, how we act with our speech and our body. So right thought is referring mostly to those kinds of intentions that then translate into the way that we speak. So right speech would be that kind of speech in which we have abandoned lying and harsh speech and divisive speech and idle gossip and so forth, all of those non-virtues. And as well, right action then is connected with our having abandoned those kinds of non-virtues of body, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and so forth. So those then are acting both sort of in accordance with the laws of the land. So the next one then is right livelihood, which consists of not just kind of acting in ways that accord with the laws of the land and so forth, but engaging in a means to sustain oneself without harming others. Our way of our livelihood should not be mixed together with any kind of non-virtuous activities, any sort of activities that that cause harm. So, and then there is right effort. This is really striving to develop those kinds of qualities which one has not yet developed and enhance and increase those which one has already developed. Then there is right mindfulness. Now, mindfulness has gained a lot of traction in our society. And in this context, we often talk about the sort of four close placements of mindfulness. But mindfulness is something that is really important in any kind of situation in all of our lives, in our day-to-day kind of life. Particularly maybe if you are elderly, you have a better understanding of this in the sense that if you're not mindful of how you're moving, how you're acting, you could fall down. So you have to be more aware of the movements of your body and so forth. But mindfulness is really being aware, being careful in whatever we're doing. Like if we're driving, we are present with driving. If we are walking, we recognize that we are walking. And having this kind of practice of being mindful is something that is extremely beneficial for creating mental stability. Like, for example, when we do a meditation of holding our mind on the breath and counting the breath, that helps to generate a kind of stability, draw the mind in. If we are mindful, aware of whatever activity we are doing, that is going to enhance our mental stability. And then there is a right concentration. And here, right concentration can involve thinking about things like dependent origination, those kinds of other sort of topics that we might be concentrating on. And something like reflecting on dependent origination. I mean, all of these topics that we are taught are things that are for us to meditate on. They're not really like objects that are out there, but they're really things to integrate and move, inspire our minds. Whether we're talking about love and compassion or these 12 links of dependent origination, these are things that are meant to help us transform. And so this is called the Noble Eightfold Path. And combining it with the attainment of the result and nirvana, the Blessed One calls these the Dharma. So this path, the kind of practices that one should take up, as well as the results that come from them, this is what the Blessed One calls the Dharma.
Oh yeah, that is awesome.
So we are out of time for today, and we will then pick up again from the sutra itself.
Thank you for your teachings today, Ginla, and thank you, Katrina, for your translations. Again, if you'd like to make an offering for the teachings, check the chat box for the information, and we'll conclude with some dedication prayers.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of wholesome's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Oh yeah, tuchen again la.
Oh yeah,
Jema jeo.
What does it? Yeah. What does